Hey, leading teen writers. Today we are finishing up our Be a Better Journalist series by talking about how to build conflict and why we build conflict in our journalism. So let's go ahead and get started. So think back to an article you might have read recently. Was it structured around a problem? Was it structured around conflict? Did the journalist do whatever they could to increase the drama, so to increase the purpose of the writing and to get more readership? Now, I don't mean that they are exaggerating things falsely in order to get you to read it. What I just mean is the way that they tell the story often highlights and emphasizes problems and conflicts and drama. And we want to ask ourselves, why do we do that in journalism? Why do we do that in news articles? How is it to our benefit if all we're doing is talking about problems all the time? So let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about that. But first, we want to support our fellow journalists. And I want to remind you guys that it's really important to read your other students' writing and to comment on it so that we can have more of a social engagement on the Leading Teen Writers platform. And people will be more likely to read yours if you comment on their articles. So I'm going to give you guys 8 minutes. Please go to the Leading Teen Writers website and read any article that you find and write a comment that engages with that article. Please take a look at some of these ideas for engagement. I really don't want you to just do one sentence. I want you to think about, okay, if I'm going to really engage with something, it's probably going to be a couple sentences, probably going to be giving examples, maybe even other sources. So please remember, tell them why you liked it, tell them what you thought was confusing, ask them a question, share something from another article that reminded you of this, and please, let's turn this into a really fun social platform. And after 8 minutes, the lesson will resume. So here is our big lesson today. We're learning how to build conflict and drama specifically for moral cultivation. So we're going to talk about what is moral, what are morals, what is morality, and why does journalism play a big role in helping us cultivate as a society what our morals are or should be. So, what are morals? Morals are society's accepted principles of right conduct that enable people to live cooperatively. So, whatever you think is right or whatever you think is good is what you're going to do in any situation because you have this set of principles that maybe were ingrained in you by your parents or by your teachers, and it allows you to make certain decisions that you know society will find acceptable. So, moral refers to what societies sanction as right and acceptable. Most people tend to act morally and follow societal guidelines. Morality often requires that people sacrifice their own short-term interests for the benefit of society. So let's say you're sitting next to a kid at lunch. They have a better meal than you do. You really want to go over and just grab that bag of chips that they have. What's stopping you? You could satisfy your hunger by stealing their chips. That would be a short-term interest. But for the benefit of society, you don't steal the thing that that person has because you have been told that stealing is wrong for whatever reason. So, morality is a way that we are able to all live cooperatively. However, deciding what our morals are is, a really daunting task. And some things are really easy to decide morally, right? We know that it's wrong to steal, but other things are not so easy to decide. For example, the right to have an abortion. Is it moral to have an abortion? Is it immoral? Is it wrong? Is it right? How do we know? Journalism really helps us refine and cultivate our morals because we get to read stories about these kinds of things happening in the world. Somebody getting an abortion, and people reacting to it. And ultimately, we start to have a healthy debate about whether we should or should not be doing these things as a society. So journalism allows for discussion. And that's why today we're learning about how to build discussion based on this idea of refining and cultivating our morals as a society. Journalism helps with moral cultivation because when we write news, we talk about what's important to us and what we value. We talk about what our standards are for the treatment of others. Maybe we criticize people who are treating people wrongly or criticizing people who have abused their power and are treating particular groups of people in the wrong way. We talk about virtues that we create as a society. We talk about why we care about things that we do. Journalism allows for healthy debate to determine what's right and wrong. It shows that we care about our future and what kind of place we're going to leave behind for the next generation. And journalism, both in the writing and reading of news, um, helps us make better decisions personally or as a society. It helps you refine your own sense of what is right and wrong, maybe not as a society, but personally and individually. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a bunch of examples today of news articles, and we're going to look how they build conflict right from the beginning and how they build that drama based on the problems and the issues that really point to a discussion about morality, about what is right and wrong. So as we read these examples, we're going to try to ask ourselves, okay, what moral issue are they bringing up here? How are they making it seem important to the reader? And in what way are we cultivating our sense of right and wrong? So here is an article from the New York Times. Australia moves to ban young teens from social media. Whoa, this might already trigger some ideas for you if you're a teen and if you use social media. The proposed legislation would put the country at the forefront of regulating social media access for children. Okay, so here's how it starts. Australia wants to ban children from social media. Far-reaching legislation, as announced on Thursday, would make the platforms that are the lifeblood of many teenagers, among them TikTok, off limits to anyone under 16. Social media is doing harm to our kids, and I'm calling time on it. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese declared at a news conference, I've spoken to thousands of parents, grandparents, aunties, and uncles. They, like me, are worried sick about the safety of our kids online. So talk about building drama, talk about building conflict. Do you guys want to, just break this down a little bit? There's really quite a sense of doom here, right? It's doing harm to our kids. They're worried sick. This is a classic, way to show that this is something that's causing conflict and problems. And maybe the language that they're choosing um, is really meant to exacerbate and emphasize this conflict. Now, the conflict is between the parents and the kids, right? The parents, in one sense, the parents are worried sick about the safety of the kids. However, the kids, they think social media is their world. So that's going to really put a conflict between parents and teenagers or adults and teenagers. Another conflict, however, is between social media and teenagers. Social media is addictive. It has a lot of negative consequences for kids, and so there is a conflict there as well. But how does this relate to morals at all? I want you guys to think about that. How does this relate to morals? How does this help us think about what's right and wrong, our moral cultivation? Well, because the answer is not very clear whether social media is bad and should be banned. It's clearly something that needs to be debated. If social media is bad for kids and we let kids do it and use it, is it morally right or is it morally wrong? And so this article does a good job of stoking these kind of fears about social media, but it also is showing that it's conflicted because this is something that kids love. It's something that kids probably wake up in the morning, go right on TikTok, go to sleep at night, looking at TikTok. So all of this conflict really helps us think about, okay, what is important when we're raising young teens? What's important? Keeping them away from things that compromise their safety, right? That's moral. So, but on the other hand, teenagers might say it's immoral to take something away from us that we want to use. It takes away our freedom. So you see, this is really helping to create controversy, helping to create debate, and it's helping us figure out where do we stand? Where do I stand personally on this matter? Where do we stand as a nation or as a world on this matter? Okay, let's try it again. We did this with the social media one. Let's try it with a different topic and see how do they build conflict. The hidden environmental costs of food. Damage to the natural world isn't factored into the price of food. But some governments are experimenting with a new way of exposing the larger costs of what we eat. Okay, so we're already seeing that conflict is being built right from the subtitle. Something is important here. Something is at stake here, right? Damage to the natural world. Um, and we're thinking of, okay, how are we going to experiment so that we can understand what is happening to the world and the environment because of what we eat. So the conflict is being built right away. Let's see how they kind of expose the moral elements behind this topic. As pricey as a run to the grocery store has become, our grocery bills would be considerably more expensive if environmental costs were included, researchers say. The loss of species as cropland takes over habitat, groundwater depletion, greenhouse gases from manure and farm equipment. For years, economists have been developing a system of true cost accounting based on a growing body of evidence about the environmental damage caused by different types of agriculture. Now, emerging research aims to translate this damage to the planet in dollar figures. Wow, how interesting. So I want to ask you, how do they build conflict and drama? Look at this first paragraph. What language do they use? What images do they use to build drama, right? The loss of species, water being depleted, the world being filled with more greenhouse gases, expensive environmental costs. All of this is contributing to a man versus nature conflict. And the fact that the environment is just being damaged and nobody's paying for it except the species. No one is paying for it so that we could maybe give that money back to helping the environment. And so that's going to hopefully change with emerging research so that people can start to see, hey, that meat that you're eating, that is not as taking such a big toll on the environment. And if we increase your meat from $10 to $30, maybe that means you won't buy the meat, and maybe that means we can help save the environment. Anyway, these are some ideas that show a moral issue here. The moral issue is we're using the natural world without thinking of the consequences. Is it right to do that or is it wrong to do that? Well, if you say, oh, it sounds wrong, yeah, but we do it. So why do we do things that are morally wrong? Well, because they're very complex. We need to satisfy as humans ourselves, even maybe at the cost of the environment. Okay, so you guys can see how this is turning into a moral debate. Some people might say, hey, we need to eat and we need to not have really expensive groceries. On the other hand, people might say, yeah, but the natural world is being destroyed. Where do you stand on the moral dilemma? And so that's how journalism can really create interesting conversations and debate. And you are going to be practicing how to create this kind of moral conflict and dilemma in your own articles. So now that we've taken a look at some examples, I think it'd be cool to think about different kinds of approaches you might take personally if you're writing an article. Here's two different kinds of approaches. I'm sure there's many more, but two that I want to go over with you. You can choose either to be very clear or you can choose to be ambiguous. What's the difference? Well, if you're being very clear in what your morality is, your article is going to argue very, very specific moral belief. For example, if you were writing that food article, you might be very clear that you think we should be doing something to change how our systems affect the environment. You're very clear on that. However, if you want the reader to be able to decide their own morals, you might be more ambiguous. You might not say, hey, here's how I want you to think. You might shed light on both sides so that readers can decide their own morals within the debate. How do you know which one to choose? Whichever one you want. I mean, maybe switch it up and do something different each time. Maybe if it's an issue you really care about and you have a really strong opinion about, you would do clear. Maybe if it was something that you think we should have more open-mindedness about, you would choose the more ambiguous. Look up what the word ambiguous means if you don't know it. It kind of means that there's no there's more than one interpretation or more than one idea that you can have because things are more complex than just a clear argument. I wanted to show you guys an example of what it might look like if you have an ambiguous article. Now, Trump just won the election, and a lot of people were worried because many people believe that Trump does not represent all of the great strides that women have made in the past hundreds of years, and they think that Trump is going to come in and take a lot of rights away from women. But this article is really interesting and kind of giving maybe both sides of the story. So let's go ahead and see how they chose this article chose the more ambiguous approach. The article is titled, "Was the Trump election a setback for women? Even women do not agree." Kamala Harris would have been the first female president in the nation's nearly 250-year history. But many women chose Donald Trump, despite his history of sexism and his support for the end of Roe v. Wade. This is the right to have an abortion. So he's trying to end the women's right to have an abortion. But this article, even within the title, is showing that it's ambiguous, right? Even people don't agree. People have different opinions about things. So this is one way you can write an article. Let's keep reading. To many left-leaning Americans, left-leaning means, more Democrats, so they probably would have voted for Kamala Harris instead of Trump. It is resoundingly clear that women who backed Donald J. Trump in the presidential election voted against their own self-interest. So a lot of people, a lot of Democrats believe that if you voted for Trump and you're a woman, you're voting against your own self-interest because Trump is not a fan of helping women thrive. That is what they think. So liberal women, again, same thing as left-leaning Americans, in particular, has spent recent days practically stunned, stewing over how other women could have rejected Kamala Harris, who would have been the first woman to lead the nation in its nearly 250-year history. Instead, they chose a candidate who spews misogyny seemingly with glee for the second time. So they're saying, okay, Trump, he just goes around hating women and criticizing women and calling women names, even with a smile on his face. So how could we have chosen him? One voter from Maine interviewed after Mr. Trump declared victory offered a takeaway shared by many. As she put it, the sisterhood did not stand up. So the article seems so far to be, pretty clear that Donald Trump doesn't, if you voted for Donald Trump, you're voting against women. However, the article shifts in its tone. And it says, but women themselves clearly were divided in the election, so it's not so clear. Exit polls show that 45% of female voters cast ballots for Mr. Trump, and far more white women voted for Mr. Trump than black women. The compounding rejection of first Hillary Clinton and then Ms. Harris has exposed an uncomfortable but steady undercurrent of American society. Women do not necessarily agree on what counts as progress or setback. So this is trying to show you there's more than one side of this idea of thinking that Trump is against women. Many women actually think that he might be progressive and might progress their interests. So the article continues. Miss Justice sees Mr. Trump's elevation of Susie Wiles as the first female chief of staff, as the first of many moves by the next president that will be good for women. Every woman who feels like Donald Trump is going to be bad for their lives may want to just wait a minute and stop listening to the mainstream media and listen to what President Trump does, she said. In last week's election, some women said they specifically appreciated Mr. Trump's support for their role as mothers. Okay, so, and if you continue reading, it's more of this trying to show both sides. It's not just showing one side, it's more ambiguous. So, in order to build conflict and drama, you may want to think about two different types of tone that you could establish in your writing. We're talking about the division between optimism and pessimism. Obviously, these are very broad categories, and within them, you can think about, okay, how optimistic do I want to be? How pessimistic do I want to be? There's gradients and subtleties, but ultimately, let's think about it. If you're going for optimism, you're going to try to embed hope and solutions within your article. After you build the conflict. So you build the conflict in the beginning, and then you're going towards hope and solutions. However, if you're doing pessimism, you are bringing the conflict to its climactic height all the way to the end. You're not offering hope and solutions. For pessimism, you're saying, hey, this is a moral issue that is not being solved, that is not being dealt with, and we need to do something about it. And so that's going to help think about, okay, I want to build that conflict all the way to the very end. For optimism, you might think, well, I want us to end on a happy note. I want to show that there's things we can do. So maybe you're not bringing us all the way to the end with the conflict, and you have to think about how you're going to structure these types of articles differently. You should practice doing all these different types of tone in different articles, and practicing how to do optimism, how to do pessimism based on how you personally feel about the moral issue at hand. And also just to practice your different styles and your different kinds of structures. So there you have it. We made it to the finish line. We did 5 different lessons on different types of ways you can perfect your journalistic style of writing. You can build characters to make your journalism more narrative based. You can add creativity by not always doing the same lead-ins to quotes. Obviously, your hooks and how the way that you end your articles are going to be what really sets you apart from other writers. This is how people obviously you hook them into your article, but also how you end your article on a lasting impression. And also, we built a lot of purpose today by talking about moral cultivation. How do we cultivate our morals through journalism? And how does this help to engage our readers even more? So remember, guys, keep writing your articles for your opportunity to get published and the opportunity to be top article of the month. And don't forget, if you have any questions, please contact me for edits and feedback. Bye.